welcome to another episode of The Queen's Table. As you can see, we are in a different studio. So we have actually come to visit our producer, Phil. And Phil is on with us today. Welcome, Phil.
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
Good, good. And we also have another really special guest, which is a reason why we have decided to tape today in this new studio. We have with us an attorney who is going to be giving us some tips on everything from how to work with your kids' IEP. I know we have a lot of parents out there who have students that are working through those plans, and also just the talk that we usually have with our sons around age. I don't know, what age do we usually start that talk with our kids? Somewhere around 10? Yeah, somewhere around 10, 11. So we have attorney Andrew Darling with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I just want to start off with, we are headed into Black History Month. And I know that there's been a lot going on, especially since 2020. That year was just so pivotal in so many ways, and especially in the area of, particularly for me, in Black history, because of what the whole world saw happen with George Floyd and how that situation escalated from a law enforcement point of view. Have we forgotten that? Have we just sort of, have we relegated that to the annals of Black history and just, are we forgetting it, or are we keeping it in front of us? And again, that thing that we have, that talk we have to have with our kids. So I want to talk about what that talk is. For people like me, I raised 2 children by myself. I don't know how that talk goes with young men. So can you give us an example of what that talk is like? I know you have a 13-year-old, right?
Yes. So I actually, I am the first person, and I think I mentioned this when we were talking pre-show. Mm-hmm. I am the first person in the lineage of all of my family forever and ever that was fortunate enough to get that talk. Okay. And I got that talk when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. I went to a predominantly Black high school, Oak Ridge High School here in Orlando. As part of that, I was with a bunch of my teammates. We all played football together, and I was at a friend's house, and there was an incident that took place, I think it was earlier in the week, something like that, with the Orlando Police Department. And it was somebody that my friend's dad knew. And he started having the conversation with all of the young men there. Mm-hmm. Like, listen, if you're driving, because we were at that age, 16, 17 years old, if you're driving, if you have an interaction with law enforcement, you can be firm, but not disrespectful. But also, at the end of the day, you're going to have to comply. Because we can fight all that other stuff on the back end.
Right.
I need you to come home.
That's wisdom.
And that's one of those things that, I've been able to, well, I guess, moment into my life. I also have a 21-year-old daughter. And then I have sort of a 19-year-old bonus son who is not biracial. And he's now a 19-year-old Black man. Mm-hmm. So I have had conversations with him multiple times because of what I do as a criminal defense attorney, and I'm not worried about him with demeanor or mannerisms or stuff like that a lot of times, as a young person, lots of folks would have gotten in trouble for, or would have been a suspect because of. Right. But, for him, it's just, you can be calm, you can be courteous, but be firm, be respectful. And if it starts to go left, look, I need you home.
Yeah.
And that's the basis of the conversation.
I don't think people get it though, because you have Black kids. You said biracial, but you didn't mention it earlier. So you have Black children.
Yeah, my oldest, all my kids are biracial. They're Black and white. The 19-year-old boy, he is, like I said, my bonus kid. He is from my oldest's mother, and he is like I said, young Black man now. Yeah. He's still a kid to me. He's bigger than me. He's like 6'3" and like 185. But no, it's funny sometimes when people who don't know me or don't know about sort of my family and where I grew up and where I'm from, like, oh, he's just just some other attorney. That's what he does. That's his. But it's like, no, like I grew up around black people nearly all my life, and it's something that I find myself incredibly fortunate because it allows me to go to spaces that other people who look like me can't go and have conversations.
So Phil, what about you? Did you have that talk? Did someone have that talk with you when you were coming up?
So my dad did have that talk, and I think I talked to you before about this. So my dad grew up in a very, very southern town in Virginia, and my dad is biracial, but he never identified as black because he wasn't allowed to.
Did he appear black?
Yeah, he looked like me, but he did not want to be black because it was scary.
Yeah,
he had to be in a town where it was not good to be black.
Right.
So a lot of his ideals were very conservative. If you get what I'm saying, it was very, very conservative. So the talk that I had with him about that, he just told me, just do whatever the hell they tell you to do, no matter how uncomfortable. I do want you home, obviously, but even if you know you're right, just do what the hell they say, because they have full authority to kill you, and then they will not go to jail for it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it seemed like it would be scarier to be someone who appears to be black and try not to be black in a community like what you're talking about. That was never a issue. Like,
so with him, he had an afro in high school, but he wasn't. I'm not gonna say he was never hood. He was just country, and so it's almost embarrassing to say. You ever see the country black people? They have a Confederate flag. My dad was one of them.
Okay.
So
that was y'all.
That's all you really need to know about.
That was your people.
About that. Yeah. So that's all you really need to know. So that was my dad. Yeah.
Okay. So is that it? That's what I'm hearing. Be respectful. You can be firm. But at the end of the day, do whatever they do what they tell you to do. Comply. Yeah. Is that the whole talk? Is that it?
No. So I think part of it, and again, part of this comes too from like the legal side of things, right? Like, I want folks to be very clear about a couple of things. One of them is you're not consenting to a search. Okay. And saying those words, I do not consent to a search, is incredibly important further down the road in case there are anything that happen legally. That's important. And then also, when they start asking questions above and beyond the traffic stop, like, I generally, like, my initial response is like, just don't answer questions at all. But then again, you're going to get into this automatic back and forth. And why, right? Like, if you don't have to, why? Yeah. But I can't stand when folks are like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. Yeah. It's like, you know how many people get exonerated off of death row? Yeah. Like, if you weren't doing anything wrong, you wouldn't be arrested. Right. No, if they were doing what was right, you wouldn't be arrested. And those are very different places to have the conversation from. But it's mostly, for young people specifically, especially the ones that are coming now of age since George Floyd was killed, that conversation, kids are paranoid when they get pulled over.
Oh, yeah.
Rightfully so.
Grown people are.
Yeah. and it's a process that I try to talk to my clients, obviously to my kids, and anybody I have an opportunity to talk to. I mean, I coach football occasionally too. So talking to young people is, listen, even if you're 100% in the wrong, you were speeding, you were doing something you weren't supposed to do, you can be respectful, but be firm. And you don't consent to a search. You are not answering questions. You're not making statements. If they have a basis to arrest you, they're going to do it regardless. Right. You don't need to help them.
Do you think the police, like, they try to intimidate you more if they just have a hunch or something? Like, because that's why people are afraid to answer any questions, right? Because they think that, I'm going to say something that I shouldn't say, even though I'm just, talking.
Yeah, so a lot of the things, and it's funny, I've done a bunch of really ridiculous TikTok videos about stuff like this, is, here are the 10 reasons why you don't answer a question when an officer comes up to your door. And one of them, for example, is like, hey, where are you headed? Like, okay, that seems innocent. Or the more sort of devious one, where are you coming from? because you don't know what that officer knows.
Yeah.
Right. So they might have like a bolo or a be on the lookout for,
Yeah.
a make, model, or car. It could have been, on the lookout for a black sedan with, 2 young black males in it. You might not even have been near there. But if they say, where are you coming from? And you're like, well, I was over by the college. I was over by the stadium. I was over by this. And that's where that be on the lookout is from.
Yeah.
Well, now you just bought yourself some time and you knew nothing about it. They're going to hold you and detain you for a little while. So there's so many reasons why you just don't answer questions. You will never help yourself by answering questions from law enforcement. You will only hurt yourself.
Wow. I've never, it just seems like there's such a, like Phil was saying, an intimidation factor that because there's that fine line between do what they tell you to do, but don't answer questions. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I'm not sure how you find that line. And especially as a young person, if you were raised in a good household, you're kind of told to, do what
Comply.
do what they tell you to do. Adults tell you to do something, you do it. So it's sort of a scary situation. And I will say, as a black mom, I was a divorced mom raising a son when the whole Trayvon Martin thing happened. I was living in Mims, which is about 30 miles away from Sanford.
How old was your son then?
My son was exactly the same age as Trayvon.
Really?
And it just, I can't even express how much that impacted me and how much it impacted him, because he was on lockdown for a long time after that. But it just became such a difficult time at that point to just know what to tell my son, and how to give him some freedom. But at the same time, it just felt like everybody's out to get you, but, so the Trayvon Martin situation, I think, exacerbated things. And then we come up behind that with, honestly, that felt like a second Emmett Till. That's what it felt like to me. And for it to be a second Emmett Till that far past Emmett Till just felt like we haven't progressed at all as a people. We still can't protect our children. So what I'm hearing for those of us, those single moms or divorced moms who are raising young men, is they need to, at the end of the day, comply. But that does not include answering questions or consenting to a search.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main sort of process. I mean, and like, we've all, either raised young men or, for Phil and I, we've been young men at one point. And young men don't always make good decisions. And we're full of testosterone and we think we know it all. Yeah. But also trying to impress on these young people how incredibly important it is to win a war. You don't have to win a battle, right? You don't have to win every single battle.
Yeah.
To get home, like most stuff in most major metropolitan areas now is on body cam. Mm-hmm. And I cannot tell you how many times my person was legally right, but because of the way you act on body cam and because of the way that you justify a law enforcement officer acting a certain way by how you respond to them. Yeah. But it's also like, our young people aren't trained to de-escalate situations,
and they shouldn't be,
when they're the suspect of something or when they're having an interaction. And it's just, it's so incredibly frustrating because there's no way that you win.
I think what gets me is what you just said. Our young people are not trained, and it's not their job to de-escalate. It's not their job to perform or to act in a certain way in that situation. But it seems as though society has put that on them, that it's not the cop who's trained in the situation. They're putting the onus on the young man who is, like you said, testosterone driven, got the frontal lobe hasn't closed up yet. You know, they're crazy. You know, at that age,
Young people,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah.
That's incredibly fair.
and then you're actually trying to hold them to the same standard that you're holding this police officer to, who has gone through training, whose job it is to de-escalate the situation. And I think that's what frustrates me the most, and that's what makes you want to push back so hard. But honestly, what I'm hearing, it doesn't get you anywhere.
Well, and that's sort of a relatively common like misconception. It's not the law enforcement officer's job to de-escalate. It's the law enforcement officer's job to arrest you if he thinks he has probable cause to do so.
Okay.
Like, we all want to say, oh yeah, we want our officers to de-escalate situations, but that's not their actual job.
That's not a part of their training?
It's supposed to be.
Okay.
But in the same way that if I go do something for a week, it doesn't make me good at it. That's 40 hours of training.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go through an academy all day. When I was in the Army, I spent 2 years as a drill sergeant in the Army. I could probably, with about a week refresher course, because you do it so much that it becomes ingrained in you. But also, I'm training all day, every day to do that. I'm not in incredibly dynamic situations like law enforcement officers are in. So these situations are different every single day.
Right.
And if a law enforcement officer has one bad interaction, well, if they've had 1,000 interactions and 2 of them were bad, you're like, okay, maybe we're okay. But if this person's been doing the job for a year and he's had 100 interactions and 2 of them are bad, you're like, oh, that's only 2%. Yeah, but 2% is a big percent versus 2 times out of 1,000 or 2 times out of 10,000.
Yeah.
And like, how crazy did the incident go?
Yeah, because if 2%, at the end of 2%, somebody ends up losing their life. You know, when you're dealing with life and death situations, 2% is still too high. You know.
I'll say this. I understand law enforcement's concern about their own safety, right?
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, they want to go home too.
Right.
And that's okay. But also, when law enforcement goes through the training, goes through the academy and all that other stuff, they get shown the same 30 clips over the last 30 years of a traffic stop gone bad, of the one time somebody, you know, in some other state, and it's not like it's the local place where this person's going to be patrolling and doing the things they're supposed to do. They show them the 30 times that something catastrophically terrible has happened. And it's like, yeah, okay, but that's not every day.
Right.
Did we show them when Philando Castillo was killed? Yeah. Because that went left, and that wasn't his fault.
Wait, that was the guy that was in the car?
In Minneapolis.
Yeah.
He was in the car and he reached for his license or whatever?
He told the officer he had his firearm permit, and he had a firearm on him. The officer told him to reach for his ID. And then the officer freaked out and shot him in front of his girlfriend and his girlfriend's baby in the back.
Yeah. Yeah, that was heavy.
Was that after George Floyd?
Mm-hmm. It's like right after George Floyd. In outside of Minneapolis. So like that's the whole sort of major metropolitan area where George Floyd happened, Philando Castillo happened.
Because we were talking, Karen and I, we were talking on another show. I came with the realization that my generation is numb to this because it happens so much. And so that's why it all blends in together. I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't tell you the names.
I can't watch police shooting videos.
I can't either. I can't.
I have a client who was shot by the sheriff's office here in Orange County back in December a few years ago. And that officer was actually indicted. I don't think the state attorney is going to go forward with the case.
Wait, what's the difference on getting in?
So there's 2 ways in Florida that you get charged, either by an information, which is the vast majority of cases. The information means the state attorney's office, through their process, decided they believe they can prove a case. An indictment is it goes through a grand jury. So you impanel a grand jury in secrecy. The state attorney presents the case to the grand jury, and then the grand jury decides whether they have probable cause to indict the person of that offense. And then it goes forward that way. So, and there's a lot of local political reasons that are not necessarily relevant to the big picture of things outside of Central Florida. But, yeah, I mean, if if my regular criminal defense clients got half the benefit of a doubt that an officer gets,
Yeah.
many more of my cases would be dismissed.
Yeah. I believe that. That sounds about right. Yeah. So I want to pivot just a little bit. I do want to make sure that I drive home, though, that this conversation that we're having during Black History Month, I want us to keep in mind, and we get stirred up when something happens, but then in between incidents, we sort of let everything fall, and we're not as vigilant about things like our rights and things like understanding what we're talking about right now, how to behave in a situation. So I want us to not forget. We don't forget Trayvon. We don't forget George Floyd. We don't forget Emmett Till. We need to not forget these names, the Sandra Bland, the Philando Castile, the Breonna Taylor. Let's not forget. So let's remember those things, and at the same time, be prepared ourselves to understand how to come home.
Mm-hmm.
How to come home. But there's another area of law that you practice that I want to also talk about, because one of the things in our community, East Mims, where we are working with Thule Community Development Group, our organization, education and education outcomes in the Black community. In our community, I believe our area still accounts for the highest dropout rates in our county. And it is very difficult to get our parents sort of engaged in. We were doing a STEM academy. We're working with NASA, bringing coding, robotics, computer lab, all kinds of things into the community. And it's like pulling teeth to get the parents involved. But through that process, I've learned that a lot of our kids are on what's called an IEP, with individual education plan. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what your organization does and what you've seen in that area?
Yeah, so we've had an opportunity. The middle of last year, I started doing special education law. What that means is I have two advocates that work directly for my law firm. They go to IEP meetings, 504 meetings. 504 meetings are essentially if somebody just needs accommodations. So like if you have somebody that needs a little bit longer on tests, or you have somebody who needs a little bit more time to pass the hallways during school, or if you have somebody that needs, any sort of like, it's mostly time and sort of space accommodations. Mm-hmm. But when you have an IEP, an individualized education plan, a lot of times that's going to be kids that need, speech therapy, occupational therapy. If you have kids that are, a lot of them that can be profoundly disabled, but they still want to go to school, well, they're going to also need time for potentially physical therapy. So they might have to have a one-on-one professional that's with them all the time. The struggle that I'm having in the sort of 6-ish months that I've been practicing this type of law is, how do I help the communities that, like those that I grew up in, communities that need help, that have more kids that have IEPs than sort of your middle class or upper class areas, mm-hmm. or they just have more kids that don't have an advocate for them. And like I said, I have two advocates that work for me. Normally they go to IEP meetings together, mm-hmm. because they have different sort of specialties. One of them, her specialty is like a behavior improvement plans, which you can be on a behavior improvement plan without an IEP. Right. So like if you get in trouble multiple times, you should have already been put on a behavior improvement plan with the school. It's usually mm-hmm. 3 times. But the purpose of our advocates going there is to hold these schools accountable to what they are legally required to do for our kids that have special needs. Right. That's the purpose of what we do.
And I think a lot of parents, from what I'm understanding, I've had a lot of parents tell me that their kids were on an IEP, but they really didn't understand what that meant, mm-hmm. As far as even what resources that opens up for them. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about those resources that come along with that?
Yes. So there are a lot of times where kids, when they're young, you want to have them evaluated. The schools are obligated to have a kid evaluated if the parents bring that up or if they independently bring it up. Mm-hmm. So once you have a kid advocated, then you have, if they have some sort of recognized diagnosis, it could be autism, it could be ADHD, it could be any number of things. You could also have an IEP for a sort of a physical limitation. So if you have a hard time hearing, if your eyes are really bad, like there's a lot of different sort of modalities, different ways to learn, that if you have an IEP, the school is required to do that. If you're a general education student, how are you going to hold the school accountable when they don't provide the things your child needs?
Right.
And the hard part too is almost the same as what you were talking about with when you guys were trying to do the STEM stuff to get it set up, and it's a perception problem, right? So a lot of young folks, and I told you this before, I was actually born in Titusville, so I'm not too far,
Right.
From over there in Mims.
Okay.
And it's one of those things, like my son plays football, and we used to play against the Cocoa Tigers, the youth football. And a lot of times Cocoa has similar neighborhoods in
absolutely.
it, where, you have parents that are working 2 and 3 jobs and doing the absolute best that they can. It's not they don't want to be involved in their kids' education.
Right.
It's when.
Exactly.
When are they supposed to be involved? When rent is going to be due, your mortgage is going to be due, lights are due,
Right.
everything. Everybody wants all your money. Like every month, it's
truth.
crazy. Every month, everybody wants all the money.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's like people will ask, well, how do you get these kids to practice? How do you get them to games? How do you whatever? It's like people in the community help. And a lot of times, especially over in Cocoa, because their football program from kindergarten through high school, I mean, they're a multi-time state champion. They are phenomenal.
They are.
They are
Yeah.
a top tier organization from entry level all the way to high school graduation. They are phenomenal football wise, because a lot of families see that as a way for their kid to get out
Right.
of where they are. And I don't think families have seen other kids that have played football and gotten out of the community and gone on to do bigger and better things. Families don't have that same tie-in for a STEM education.
Right.
Most families don't know somebody that works at NASA, right? It's one of those things that I didn't have that growing up. I'm the only attorney in my family. I don't know any other attorneys in my family.
Yeah.
Of the sort of like 7 classes, right? So the class that you're in high school when you're a freshman, the 3 classes above you, and then when you're a senior, the 3 classes below you, there are 2 other attorneys. From 7 years at Oak Ridge High School, there are 2 other attorneys that I know of
Wow.
from that time period.
That's it.
One is a year older than me. One is a year younger than me, I think.
But I think even going back to talking about, history again, there were so many quote unquote hidden figures that were Black engineers at the Space Center. We just don't talk about it. We just only want to talk about the Wilbur Marshalls and the John Bostics and all those guys that went to the NFL. I don't know where they went from, but that went to the NFL. But there were so many. My father, for example, one of the first Black engineers at NASA. There's others in our community that we just have to start talking about a little bit more so that people do have that tie-in. One of the, we have not had, we've got a Black astronaut now that's going, I think he'll be one of the first on the moon. I think it's Victor Glover, I think. But we just have to start showing these role models a little bit more. But you're right. The tie-in isn't there. And so when we start talking about IEPs, it doesn't matter to parents. And this is the heartbreaking part. He's running the ball. He's doing great, but he can't read. And I don't think there is a rule that if he's on an IEP or if he's getting, that information that he needs, that he can't play football. Why can't we, prioritize both?
Well, and so one of the, athletically specifically, is there's a lot of stuff now going on in high school and college with name, image, likeness, right? Your ability to make money off of your name, image, and likeness, so that the school isn't the only.
That's what NIL stands for?
Name, image, and likeness.
Yo, I had no clue. I learned something new today. All right.
So the process now is so many of these young people are now making money. And at 18, 19 years old, I don't know that I was capable of being responsible with that amount of money.
Right.
And when these kids are doing that, but some of them don't read on a high school level, but they're athletically gifted out of this world, and they work hard, and they end up in college. A lot of these kids, but for athletics, have no desire to go to college. Folks look at college oftentimes as you would look at another city. Where you going? I'm going to college. It's the same context as I'm going to Miami. I'm going to New York. I'm going to wherever. College is not a place. College is a thing you do. College is a series of checklists that you have to complete over a 4-year period.
Unless you're running a ball.
Yes. But I would say this too. I actually think there are a lot of places where kids are only going to be able to stay in school for a couple of years before the lack of education catches up to them.
But it's not really in the college's best interest if there is a lack of education to point that out. It's not really in their so they just kind of keep sliding them through or whatever. But I have a friend who went all the way through school, actually played for the Lakers for a little while, blew out his knee, and ended up, I hope he doesn't watch this, but ended up living with his mom. So I just want to put that out there. You're as good as your body can sustain all of the impact that it's taking. But once it's up here, it doesn't matter. You got it. You got it.
So do the high schools prep these kids for anything academic when they're athletes? Because I mean, I've seen a lot of people go to college, but they're not very smart because they just do run, jump. They do the sports stuff. So like, not every athlete is going to be an athlete in the professional realm. So do they even prepare them for that stuff afterwards, or what?
So preparation is kind of a funny thing, because it's like, what is it you're preparing for, right? Like if you're preparing to go out and be an adult, that is actually a little bit different than preparing to go to school, and it's a little bit different than preparing to play in some sort of sporting event, right? A lot of these high school coaches actually don't have that much control over their athletes every day. I know, I've been a high school coach, right? I've been a high school head football coach.
That's true.
So your kids are in different classrooms every day. Your kids are in different parts of the classroom. Like they have different classes in high school. But it's also one of those things where once this kid meets whatever the requirements are for high school and graduates, if that college accepts them, that's on that college. And I try to teach my kids like sort of bigger life lesson things. Like, there are some fights worth having. Some fights, not so much.
Pick your battles.
And trying to get that skill set to our young people. And also just don't be scared to work hard. Like you can fix a lot of errors in your life and what you think are inabilities in your life by just showing up and doing the work.
Yeah. And
for a lot of our young people, they've seen so many other young people have success, whether it's being an influencer or,
that's it.
That's what they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't shame you for that.
Really? Come on.
So here's a
real
sidebar, right? I have a person that I met, and again, I don't call her a friend. I met her when I was in law school. Before I went to law school, I was driving Uber for a while. While I was driving Uber in Columbia, South Carolina, there was a young lady that I picked up, like it was from college campus or something, brought her back to her apartment. We were talking. I used to have a YouTube channel way back about technology when I was reviewing tech. Again, I may or may not be a geek, but that's a side conversation. So during that process, I talked to her. She was like, hey, I'm starting this YouTube channel. I'm doing this. I want to be an influencer, makeup, all this different stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I was like, well, what's your social media stuff? Like, we can follow each other and just see how it goes. She's got like 1 million followers now. She's been flown out to Italy and Paris to go do different, like the fashion shows and makeup stuff. And I mean, she's crushing it. But she went to school first. right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
She got where
She
she
worked
was
hard.
because she knew what she wanted to do and then busted her butt to get there. And I don't think I've even like sent her a DM in probably 4 or 5 years. Like we talk every couple years.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, yo, I see what you're doing. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's nothing other than that. But it's like, I remember when you got out of my car,
Yeah.
you were telling me, look, we're finna do this. I'm finna grow my following. I'm finna do all of this. And she goes, I'm gonna be all over the world. I was like, okay, I'm with you. I support you.
So
Karen, do the kids that you deal with now, is being like an influencer, is that something that they strive to be? Because
yeah, that's the number one career path.
is that a real career path? That's what I'm trying to ask. Is that a real career path?
I like what you're saying, because what I'm seeing is that I don't know whether it's your age group or it's my kids' age group, which is like a little younger than you. But there seems to be this idea that college doesn't matter anymore, that getting the schooling doesn't matter anymore, because I can fall backwards into success. And if I can just get 1 million followers, I don't know anything and I haven't been taught anything, but if I could just get the followers, I don't have much to say, but if they'll just follow me, that's the concern, is when it's unrealistic. I think it is realistic when you do have something to say. When you have taken the time to educate yourself, when there's something real or something innovative about the way that you're approaching whatever industry you're in. But when you're just going to regurgitate stuff and be in an echo chamber when you're not getting any new, fresh anything, that's a pipe dream. That's a serious pipe dream.
So I'm not gonna take this too far because I have a lot of thoughts about this. There are young people all over the place that have opinions, and that's great. But what experience do you have behind your opinion? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that, like, so I'm 39. I am, like one of the oldest millennials, if you will. Like, I'm 84. Some people cut the year off at 84. Some cut it off at 82. Some at 80. Right. So I am incredibly grateful that all of my time in high school was not on social media, because listen, the things I'd have had to explain to the Florida bar if that stuff was on social media. But what I would say is, young people just want to be heard, which is fine. I want you to be heard, but who do you want to hear you and why? And like, a lot of times we don't think about the listener. The young people, I would say specifically, don't think about the listener. They're thinking about themselves and getting a message out there. Mm-hmm. Until you think about who's the person you're trying to get this message to, nobody cares about your message. Like, what experience in life do you have? And like, particularly, I would say for young women, young girls, being beautiful is great. Congratulations. You won the
genetic lottery.
Yeah, right, you won the genetic lottery, which is probably exactly the phrasing I was going to use, right? Like, congratulations. Yeah. That's amazing. But also, what does that mean? Yeah. You had no impact on that. Mm-hmm. Like, literally, okay, maybe you ran track, you did, you were in shape. But the reality is you had very little impact on that.
Right.
It's easy for an attractive young woman to get followers on social media, to actually convey a message that matters on social media for anybody of any age is much more difficult.
Yeah.
And until you actually know what the message is you're trying to get across, what almost nothing in life just shows up and helps you be great. It's not a thing. It's a path. It's a series of things. Yeah. There are steps that you have to take. And I posted something the other day. It's from like 7 years ago. And it was, I had just driven like 13 hours from where I lived in Columbia, South Carolina, where my family lived, down to Miami for the second half of law school. This is after my family and I went to Ghana, which frankly we didn't have the money to do, but my wife's from Ghana, so while we were there, we almost didn't have expenses. We were staying with family. We were eating amazing because Ghana is a beautiful, beautiful place. But I posted it and I was like, 7 years ago, I was struggling. I didn't live with my family. I was living in Miami going to law school. I was having to FaceTime my son, FaceTime my daughter, FaceTime my wife every day. If you tell me today you ain't willing to sacrifice, you aren't willing to struggle for a little bit to be successful later, I don't have nothing for you. I don't respect that.
Right.
I know what I've gone through, and I don't tell people half the stuff we had to go through.
Right.
But it's like, to get to a place now where I'm running a middle 6-figure law firm, trying to get to 7 figures, right? Like, that's exciting to me. But also, if you're not willing to go through that struggle, if you're not willing to have mornings that you wake up at 3:30 in the morning because you got to drive 12 hours, maybe you don't have to drive 12 hours, but golly, the work ain't free.
But I think that's a part of the reason why we have these parents who are not necessarily willing to find out all the things that their child might be entitled to based on that IEP or based on whatever other things that they're doing, because they have. What I'm finding is that most of them are millennials. The parents are the millennials, and their children are the ones that are actually coming to our center, or we're dealing with in some way. The millennials, the younger ones, I'm not going to say, but the younger ones were raised up as what we call digital natives. So their whole psyche is the influencer thing. Their whole psyche is, I can start a channel or get the followers. So education became less important. And I'm not sure if that's the same with this next generation. I don't know whether it gets deeper from there or they start to say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. From my experience, one of my children graduated from Florida A&M. The other one is just like, it doesn't matter. So I don't know. I can't judge from that generation yet. But I think that's part of the problem, that they're not valuing education. So when the school is telling them your child needs more help in this area, and these are the ways that we can get you more help, it's just not all that important.
Well, part of the issue with sort of that process is, we do talk a lot about sort of what is the value of education. And there's all the studies that have gone, over decades, and you're going to make, X million more dollars over a lifetime if you have a college degree, then if you have a professional degree, and then if you have, a doctorate of some level. And all that stuff is fine, but it's also like the value of education used to make a lot of sense in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s, because the cost of college wasn't astronomical.
True.
The cost now is astronomical. And for me, like, as an example, my student loans start with a 3 and it ain't 30. So for me, right? But I got my associate's degree when I was in the Army. I had no student loan debt. When I got out of the Army, I started going back to get my bachelor's degree, and I was kind of double dipping, right? Like, I was using the Army for my VA benefits, but I was also taking some student loans because I was making about half what I was making when I was in the Army.
Was that the GI Bill that you
used?
Yeah,
so the GI Bill was covering part of it, and then you can still do your grants and loans and whatever. So I was doing both, really, to keep my family at the same sort of income level. And then going all the way through law school and whatever, Miami is not cheap.
No, it's not.
Not as a transfer student either. So I went to Miami Law as a transfer, and it was very expensive for 2 years. And that's not even considering the fact that I had to have another apartment away from my family. I had to drive back and forth from Columbia, South Carolina to Miami, Florida. And the directions were really easy, though. So from Columbia, you get on 77 to I-26, and you get on I-95. They're like, okay, well, when do you get off I-95? When it stops?
Right.
Like when I-95 stops in Miami.
But let me tell you this, though. There are ways, because I had lost a job in Sarasota in, I think, 2011. And my daughter was graduating in 2012. And it was just like, okay, mama don't have the money to put you in school. So I will tell you, we wrote, I shouldn't say this, I wrote every what is it, scholarship essay, every scholarship we could find, we wrote for it. My daughter graduated with zero debt. And not only that, every semester she made money. She had about $3,000 that was just,
Grants.
we didn't need it.
Yep.
You know, we didn't need it for tuition or housing or anything. So it just depends on the value that you place on it. Because honestly, I was sitting there for at least a few hours a day, while I was working full time. I was looking for grants. I was looking for scholarships because we valued education, and I didn't have it. I had just lost the job and had to move back in with my mom. It was that kind of a situation, and I knew I didn't have it, and so we had to figure out a way. For my son, he was a football player, so I knew he was going to get a football scholarship, and he did. But it was a partial scholarship. I had told him keep a 3.0 so that you can get football and academic. He didn't do it. He got a 2.8 and ended up missing the scholarship. And so I said, well, you're going to have to do Navy Reserve because that's another way where they will pay for the other portion of your schooling. And so there's a way if you value it. Now for myself, my father paid every tuition, all books, rent. My dad was just like that. So we graduated with no debt. But then I wanted a master's. And so now I do.
Yep.
Have not as much as you, but
Karen,
I have that.
Karen, do the people in your community, do they not seem to see the value in like continuing the education?
I wanna first say it's not just my community. It's
everywhere.
not just my community. I fear for our community, the Black community. That
You're included in this, Andrew. You passed the vibe check.
So I'm concerned about the Black American community. It seems like we as a aggregate are not valuing education the way we used to. I don't know what that's about. I think it's what we just talked about, though. As the millennials are becoming the age group that is sort of running things right now, having grown up as in my communications classes, they called you guys digital natives. We were here before the internet. My age group, we know a world without the internet, but the people who grew up with where everything was digital and everything was technology, I think that mindset is I can be like, who was it, Steve Jobs Steve Jobs that didn't go to college or didn't, one of the tech giants just didn't do college at all. And it's like, well, what do I need this for?
Well, so that to me is one of my favorite kind of examples is like the Mark Zuckerberg dropping out of Harvard, Bill Gates not finishing his degree. Yeah, but they already had their parents' support. They already had financial resources. They already had an entire team, infrastructure, friends, family. They weren't going to go without food.
Right.
They were okay. They had their basic needs met. And it's so hard for a lot of our parents today, when you're in survival mode all day, to think through, well, next week he has this test. I got to make sure that he's getting his extra time.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks, we have this follow-up appointment with the teacher. What do I need to do to be prepared for that? Like, it's all these things. And a lot of this preparation, it's like, well, when are you going to do this? When you're like, all right, do I have money for lunch today? Can I get dinner on the table?
And I've been there. I have been there. My kids were not on IEPs. My kids were, both of them did pretty good in school. But I remember the struggle. And I only had two. The ones who have more than two, it's just mind blowing to me. I've been to the place of, okay, I'm going to take our bicycles to the pawn shop so that we'll have lunch money for next week. So that I'm not going to have to send them to school with no lunch or whatever. I've been there. So and then having to pick up a second job, thank God I never had to do that. But for the people that do, I don't know how you do it because who's watching them do homework?
That's the supervision piece of kids.
Right.
Like that is, I don't want to say mandatory, but I actually think after school activities, sports, clubs, things like that, I really think they should be mandatory. And obviously, if you have somebody that's in a position, to be a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad or whatever, okay, great. Come get your kids. Go do what you want, right? But it's like, if you have kids, the skill sets, the social skills, the ability to do hard things, athletics gives you that. Even if you're not athletic, like being in the band, which, okay, before any band people say anything, it's athletic, it's hard. I'm with you.
I was a band person.
Playing an instrument is incredibly difficult. I can't do it. I'm not saying being in a band is not athletic. It is athletic. Unless it's an orchestra, then it's less athletic, but also incredibly important skill set for society. But anyway, I want kids to do things, because when you take their time from them in constructive ways, study halls, athletics, clubs, whatever, guess what they're not doing? They're not out getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And again, by saying this, that's not good for my business, right? Like, if young people are out getting in trouble, that's good for my business.
Oh my gosh.
But I don't care about that,
Yeah.
right? My business is going to be fine. I want kids to not be in trouble.
Yeah.
I want kids to grow, to learn, to do hard things. And that's something that a lot of folks just don't have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what kind of gets me also with our organization, because we have a building right in the middle of the projects. Right there. You can't, if you live in our community, you can't miss our building. It's accessible. You can walk to it from anywhere in that community. We have a computer lab. We have robots. We have drones. We have iPads. We have everything a kid might need to just go crazy, and it's free. And a lot of times we just don't get the engagement. And I don't, we did a tech tournament this fall. The grand prize is $1,000. We give you all the materials. We bring you in a coach from NASA. I mean, you can't, what?
That's so cool.
I mean, and they get to build a little rover. And there's a terrain that one of my very talented staff members has created, a terrain for them to code these rovers to go over the terrain. We're going to teach you how to do it, So I don't understand.
Am I too old to do this?
You're too old, Phil. You're too old. And it's just like, I don't understand the lack of engagement. I went outside yesterday after getting off work, and there were a bunch of kids screaming, running, hollering, playing. And I was like, did y'all not hear about the tech tournament? Did you not hear about what the prize was? And they were like, they heard about it. Oh, can we go in there? I said, it's too late. The teams are already formed and they're already working. You're too late to get in. But yeah, they're out there running and screaming instead of learning how to build a rover. And I'm like,
why is that though? Because that's really, really rad. That's super cool. And like, that's where I think that's where I told you where I felt that there's a disconnect. 'Cause like, I don't think we didn't have those type of resources.
Right.
You know what I mean? That just didn't exist. We had Discovery Zone where we could walk around in ball pits and stuff. You remember that, Andrew, right? And so like
Curry Ford Cimarron.
Yeah, we didn't have that. So like, why do you think the younger
I don't know.
the younger kids don't care? Because it's the information is there.
That's hard for me. That's rough for me, because when we first started the organization, when we were talking about doing STEM, there was a young man that was walking up and down, and he would have a NASA shirt on. And I was like, so, hey, you like NASA? And started giving him little trinkets and things that we had gotten. And he's one of the ones that was outside screaming yesterday, just running around. And I love to hear them playing and laughing and all of that. But, are you passing? What are your grades like? Am I going to see you next week in trouble with... So I don't know.
You'll need a rapper to come promote it. No, really, you need like one NBA young boy or somebody just to come out and be like, "Yo, this is cool."
Yeah,
because that's what they're into.
Well, and I think some of it too is like it's kind of a value question, right? Like, what do you value? And for a lot of folks, and listen, until probably the last 2 or 3 years, mentally and actually, I was pretty damn poor. Right, like I'm doing better now. Like I tell my son, the last year and a half.
I feel you, Andrew. I do.
Listen, the last year and a half is the first time, if it's the end of the month, and my son's like, "Hey, Dad, let's stop and get some food." I don't have to like open up my banking app and be like, man, can we go get some food right now? Like we're okay. Like we're finally to a place where we're comfortable right now. But it's also like when particularly poor people, and it's not just poor folks that live in a black community or, you know, white community, Spanish community, whatever. Poor people in general don't value organizations that come and say, we're trying to do these amazing things. Yeah, but it's free.
Exactly.
Like, what's the catch? Like, there's no, it doesn't
Right.
register because they've been taught their whole lives through their experiences that anything that's free, they're trying to get something out of you.
Yeah.
And it's just a hard thing to convince somebody that we're giving you tools to help yourself.
And why I thought it was going to be different is because that's my community, born and raised right there. I'm not trying to trick you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just trying to make sure that no other kid in this community feels like I felt when I was coming up here. You know, I felt like we were left behind. I felt like nobody knew we were there. I kept asking, why are we the poor people? What's going on in this community? You know, I wanted them to see something different. Let me take you out here to NASA. Let me show you the rockets, you know, that are right in your backyard, you know. So I get it. There's this implied value thing of if it's free, it's not good, you know. So I think that the IEP, I think that knowing that there is an organization that does that has a legal backing, like we were talking about some of the other things, the advocates may or may not be regulated by anything, right?
Yeah, so that's kind of that's one of the things that I use kind of just as a competitive advantage, right? Like when you hire my advocates, they have the same obligations to you of confidentiality, of all of those things that a law firm has because they work for my law firm. Right. So when you hire another, and listen, there are a bunch of advocates out there that are really good at their job. Let me not say a bunch. There are some advocates that are really good at their job. There are some advocates that are going to do more harm than good. You should have just went to the meeting yourself.
Yeah.
But the problem that we have is most parents don't even know you can bring an advocate to a meeting.
Right.
That's true. We didn't know.
Yeah.
You met Dominic a minute ago.
Yeah.
You know, so he had everything that he has is IEP, and you know, my wife, she has felt like she's had to do this alone because she didn't even know that the information was even out there that someone could actually, you can have an advocate to help you with this. What? So she's just now learning this.
That's the thing. Like as a parent, you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't even know what you can ask for. You can ask for anything. They can say no.
Yeah.
But also, like, there are some young people, and it's a lot of times it is folks that are, you know, severely autistic, right? So like they're not exactly high functioning kids that you're going to need a one-on-one paraprofessional with that kid all day.
Yep.
There's no way around that.
Yep.
That kid, because of the way they process information, the way they process stimuli, there are certain things that could make them potentially a physical danger to somebody. So it's also like, not only do you need a one-on-one paraprofessional, but you need a one-on-one paraprofessional who is large enough in the situation, if the situation arises, to handle themselves and also not injure the young person. So there are so many things that so many folks just don't know. But it's not your job as a parent is to advocate for your child, right? Regardless of the sort of context. Even if it's a situation, and I run into this all the time with my 13-year-old, even when they're sort of dead wrong in a situation at school, well, I still want to protect the process. Did you, as a school, function the way you were supposed to?
Right.
To let me know, to let my son know what the expectations were, to do all these different things.
Oh, that's the lawyer coming out.
Listen,
Right.
I had a conversation with my son's school the other day, and I had to send my wife because my wife is definitely not the one. My wife will dress you down, and you will feel like, what just happened? She's been in the Army 22 years. She turned down her last promotion to Sergeant Major so she could retire next year. And for me, I don't play about my kids, right? Like those are my babies. Those are my little jokers. My son is a knucklehead. Love him to death.
All.
But also, as a school, when I send you an email, when I send you documentation, you do not talk to my kid about anything discipline related without me or his mom being there, and you continue to do it, procedurally, you're messing up. Yeah. But also because of what I do professionally, you don't understand like what's
how
about
much
to happen
you're messing
to y'all.
up.
And I could not go to the school the other day. I was that heated, and it was one of those processes where like I called her. I'm like, hey, please go take care of that. But there's other times, like you said, you know, like if you're a single parent, you don't necessarily have that phone call, that text message away. You might have to take off work. And like I run my own business, which and like I joke about like it's amazing. I create my own hours, whatever. That's crap. I work like 16 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Yep.
Like today is I'm not working day, right? I'm not working today. But also, I mean, I got my hoodie on. Right. I'm out here, right? So it's and if I get a phone call and it's about a potential new client, I'm taking a phone call because that's how you have to run a business. Mm-hmm. Like I know if Phil gets a phone call from somebody and they're like, hey man, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. I need the studio time. Phil better get up and go walk around that corner and take a phone call. Mm-hmm. Like that's life. Yeah. But also our young people, this is the time that we have to make them better, to help them grow, to give them an example of how to be successful when you get older. Yeah. Because that's the goal. Like at the end of the day, like the goal is to make a productive, functioning adult. Like I want every one of the kids that I've ever coached. I want every one of the kids that I have, any of their friends, whatever. I just want you to one, make it to adulthood. Right. But then I want you to be able to contribute. I want you to be able to go do something you enjoy. And while going and doing something you enjoy is not a requirement, it's kind of a pipe dream. It's kind of a wish. Like people give me stuff all the time because I'm one of the few lawyers anybody knows that actually likes their job. Yeah. Like I love what I do. Yeah. I absolutely love criminal defense work. I love the special ed stuff. I do some personal injury. I don't love personal injury, but we'll do it if I know you. And it's just one of those things that my kids, who they are seeing now, is who I'm supposed to be. Yeah. And a lot of times when kids are young, their parents aren't to that place yet where they're able to be in a place financially, emotionally, that's where they want to be. And so many parents just aren't where they want to be.
Yeah. Who do the kids have now as role models besides their parents? Like, who do they idolize? Like your kids besides you and your mom, you and their mom.
So my daughter, a 21-year-old, like she's probably the person on the planet I'm closest with. Mm-hmm. Like she was born 2 months after I turned 17. We pretty much grew up together, right? And the way I explain it is my 21-year-old, my 13-year-old, and the newborn, they're all getting completely different versions of me. Absolutely. As a dad. Yeah. Like my oldest got me as a baby. Like I wasn't even out of high school. Yeah. And all my time in the Army, my deployments, all that other stuff, you know, I mean, I've had custody of her since she was 8 years old. And I had her for multiple years before that. So it's one of those things where like she grew up in the house with my wife, and my wife has known my oldest since she was 2 years old. And like my daughter lived with us for the majority of her childhood. Mm-hmm. The examples that my daughter had, she didn't always take advantage of. And I mean, she works now. She's a manager at we'll just say one of the large shipping organizations that moves mail boxes and stuff around. Okay. But she's doing fine. But it's also like we're finally to a place where, and I think this is the place where a lot of folks that grew up the way that we did is we want to give our kids a situation where like when we were growing up, it was, all right, you 18, military, college, or whatever, you getting out.
Why though? Why is that? White people don't do that. They keep their kids forever.
And that's one of the things that I finally got to a place now that I'm like, I tell my daughter all the time, bring your butt home. Like there's no, why are you out spending $1,000, $1,400, $1,300 a month on all your bills when you make $2,000 a month? Like, why?
I do the same thing. She's not listening to me, but I do.
Like, well, I need my space. Yeah. Okay, so go out every other weekend. Go get a hotel room. That's a lot cheaper than staying here for 28 days a month. Yeah. And also the things that we're able to give our kids now, not even financially, but like lesson wise, like I'm hustling every day to grow my business, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm not driving back and forth from Columbia to Miami, taking so many classes, trying to get a degree, then studying for the bar exam, then doing all. So like, I'm finally in a place where I can give you the things I've been wanting to give you. The reason why it was so hard for me to give you anything for so many years, I'm there now.
Yeah.
We're good. But it's also, why make it harder for yourself? And it's like, I joined the Army when I was 19 years old. I made it hard on myself. I called my grandma when I got to Kansas, to Fort Riley, where I was stationed. I was like, Grandma, so when you separate these clothes, how many piles you put these clothes in? Like, when I was in basic training, everything gets washed in one basket. But I mean, household skills I didn't have. I was never.
Yeah.
My grandma just did everything. I didn't have those. But it's one of the things too. Like, my wife is amazing about stuff like that. Like, all my kids, well, except for the baby, they know how to wash their clothes, do the dishes, make some food, all those. I don't know that. Give me some Kraft mac and cheese, I could do some things, but like, that's about it. But I mean,
I think, like you're saying, like, why do we send our kids out or whatever? Being someone who raised kids alone, I think it's a different dynamic when you have two people in that household. I was ready for my children to leave. I really was. But my objective was for them to get into college. And honestly, my thought has always been, like you said, I tell people all the time, you're not raising a child, you're raising an adult. Don't treat them right now in a way that you want to treat a child. Treat them in a way that will help them become an adult that can function in society. And I think that's a great place for us to kind of end things today, is that what we're talking about is how to create young people that can function in society, whether we're talking about a police stop or whether we're talking about how to deal with their education and how to get the most that we can for them through these IEP and other processes. But trying to create, ultimately, as we always say at the Queen's Table, trying to empower our community. And you can't do that if you're not raising kids that can be functioning adults in that community. So I want to thank you, Andrew Darling Law, for being with us today. I appreciate all your insights. And Phil, thank you for sitting in on this episode where we have more kings at the table than queens again today, but that's okay. And thank you for signing on. Thank you for spending some time with us. And I'll be looking forward to seeing you on our next episode of the Queen's Table.
See ya.
Take care. Thank you for having me.